Have you ever stopped to wonder, why are we here? What is real? What makes something right or wrong? What does it mean to live a good life? If you have, congratulations, you have already dipped your toes into philosophy. Philosophy isn't some distant, dusty subject locked away in university libraries. It's alive. It's around us every day. And at its core, it's about asking the biggest questions humans can ask and refusing to settle for easy answers. The word philosophy comes from the Greek philo, means love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. So quite literally, philosophy is the love of wisdom. But wisdom isn't just knowledge. It's a deep, thoughtful pursuit of truth, understanding, and meaning. Philosophy doesn't give you quick facts. It gives you tools, ways of thinking critically, analyzing ideas, questioning assumptions, and seeing the world through new lenses. Now, that might sound abstract, but it's actually deeply personal. Think about it. Every time you ask yourself why something matters, whether something is true, or what you should do, that's philosophy. It's about being human. It's about living a thoughtful, examined life. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And that quote still echoes today. In a world of noise, opinions, and uncertainty, philosophy invites you to pause, reflect, and reason, not just react. And here is something important. Philosophy isn't just Western. Many Greek philosophical traditions were born outside of Europe, from India to China to Africa and beyond. Humans have been wrestling with life's deepest questions for thousands of years. So in this video, we'll take a journey. We'll explore what philosophy is, where it came from, and how it works. We'll meet the greatest thinkers who shaped human thought. And we will also talk about why philosophy still matters today, in your life and mine. We will dive into topics like ethics, truth, knowledge, consciousness, free will, and even the meaning of life. And we will do it in a way that's clear, engaging, and maybe even a little fun. Because philosophy isn't about having all the answers. It's about learning to ask better questions. So, are you ready to think deeply, to challenge your assumptions, and maybe even change how you see the world? Let's begin. Philosophy might seem like a one big subject, but really it's a collection of branches. Each one explores a different part of human experience, from what exists to how we should live. Let's break down the major branches of philosophy, one by one. First one, metaphysics. This is the study of reality. It asks questions like what exists, what is time, is the universe made of matter, energy, or something else entirely? Do we have free will? Is there a soul? Metaphysics dives deep into the nature of existence itself. It's abstract, yes, but it's also essential, because before we can understand life, we have to ask what life actually is. Next, we have epistemology. This is the study of knowledge. What does it mean to know something? How do we tell truth from belief, or fact from opinion? Can we ever be certain of anything? Epistemology forces us to confront the limits of our understanding and ask how we know what we think we know. Then there is ethics. Ethics is the study of morality. It explores what's right and wrong, good and evil, just and unjust. It asks questions like, should we always tell the truth? Do the ends justify the means? What do we owe to the other people? Ethics isn't just for philosophers. It's for anyone who has ever faced a difficult decision. Another major branch is logic. Logic is the toolset of philosophy. It helps us reason clearly and avoid faulty arguments. Think of it like mental math. It keeps our thinking sharp and structured. Logic teaches us to recognize fallacies, spot contradictions, and make solid rational points. Then there is aesthetics, the philosophy of art and beauty. What makes something beautiful? Is art just self-expression, or does it have deeper meaning? Why do we value music, paintings, poetry, or cinema? Aesthetics help us explore creativity, taste, and emotions through a philosophical lens. And finally, we have political philosophy. This branch deals with power, justice, rights, and government. What makes a society fair? What is freedom? What role should the state play in our lives? Political philosophy to help us think critically about how we organize ourselves and how we should. These branches don't exist in isolation. They constantly overlap. You can't study ethics without also thinking about metaphysics. You can't dive into aesthetics without touching on emotion and truth. Together, they give us a map, a way to navigate the big questions in life. And as we will see in the next section, the earliest philosophers were already building these branches, one thought at a time. So now that we have explored what philosophy covers, let's travel back in time and see where it all began, with the birth of Western philosophy. To understand how Western philosophy began, we have to journey back, way back to ancient Greece, around 2500 years back. Before philosophy, there was mythology. People explained the world through stories of gods and heroes. Thunder was Zeus throwing lightning. The seasons were caused by the moods of goddess. These myths gave meaning to a mysterious world. But they didn't rely on a reason. They didn't ask, what if there's a natural explanation? Then something changed. A few thinkers along the Ionian coast, what is now Western Turkey, began to question the stories. They asked, what is the world made of? Can you understand it through reasons, not myth? These were the pre-Socratic philosophers. One of the earliest was Thales of Miletus, who proposed that everything comes from water. That might sound simple, but it was revolutionary. He was looking for a natural principle, not a supernatural one. Others followed. Anaximander speculated about infinite substances. Heraclitus said that everything is in flux. You can't step in the same river twice. And Parmenides argued that change is an illusion. These debates may sound abstract, but they were laying the groundwork for science, physics, and metaphysics. Then came Socrates, the most famous philosopher who never wrote a word. What made Socrates different was his method. He didn't teach facts. He asked questions, constantly, annoyingly even. He would stop people in the street and ask them to define things like justice, courage, or virtue. And no matter how confident they were, Socrates would unravel their answers with logic, exposing contradictions. His goal wasn't to embrace, but to show that wisdom begins with recognizing your own ignorance. The Socratic method, asking, probing, and thinking carefully, became the heart of philosophy. Socrates' student was Plato, who wrote dialogues featuring his teacher. Plato believed in a world of perfect forms, unchanging ideals like justice, beauty, or truth. He thought our world was just a shadow of that perfection. Plato's student, in turn, was Aristotle, perhaps the most influential philosopher in the history. Unlike Plato, Aristotle was more grounded. He focused on observation, logic, and categorization. He studied biology, ethics, politics, and even theater. To him, everything had a purpose, and philosophy's job was to understand it. Together, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid the foundation of Western thought. Their ideas shaped Christianity, science, education, and government. Even today, law schools, philosophy courses, and political theory often begin with them. But this is only the half of the story. While the Greeks were debating the nature of reality, other rich philosophical traditions were flourishing in the East. So now let's shift our focus and explore the wisdom of the East. While Greek philosophers were building the foundations of Western thought, Profound philosophical traditions were also blossoming across the East, each offering unique perspective on reality, ethics, and the self. Let's start in India, where philosophical inquiry goes back over 3000 years. Ancient Indian philosophy is closely tied to spiritual traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. But make no mistake, these traditions contains deep and rigorous philosophical systems. One of the earliest philosophical texts in the world is Upanishads, a collection of teachings that explore the nature of reality, consciousness, and the self. Central to Indian thought is the idea of Brahman, the ultimate infinite reality, and Atman, the individual soul. In many schools of Indian philosophy, the highest truth is realizing that Atman and Brahman are one. Then came Buddhism, founded by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Buddhism challenges the notion of permanent self. It teaches that everything is impermanent and that clinging leads to suffering. But it's not just spiritual, it's deeply philosophical. Buddhist thinkers like Nagarjuna developed ideas about emptiness, dependent origination, and the limits of language, concepts that still influence global philosophy today. In China, we find two of the most influential philosophies in human history, Confucianism and Taoism. Confucius focused on ethics, social harmony, and the importance of relationships. He believed that a good society starts with the good individuals, people who practice kindness, respect, and duty. His ideas shaped Chinese civilization for over 2 millennia. On the other hand, Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, emphasized living in harmony with the Tao, the natural flow of the universe. Taoism encourages simplicity, non-attachment, and going with the flow rather than forcing our will onto the world. It's poetic, paradoxical, and deeply reflective. Meanwhile, in Japan, Zen Buddhism emerged, a fusion of Indian and Chinese ideas. Zen emphasizes direct experience over theory. It values stillness, meditation, and intuitions. Its teachings are often delivered through koans, puzzling stories or questions meant to break the mind out of logical patterns. What makes Eastern philosophy so unique is its holistic approach. It doesn't separate reason from emotion or body from mind. It often blends philosophy with spirituality, ethics with daily life. It asks not just what is truth, but how should I live in harmony with the world. And while Western thought often seeks clarity through analysis, Eastern philosophy is comfortable with paradox, mystery, and silence. It invites us not to conquer nature, but to observe and align with it. These Eastern traditions have deeply influenced not just Asia, but the entire world, from mindfulness practices and martial arts to meditation, poetry, and beyond. So when we ask what is philosophy, we must think globally. Human beings everywhere have been asking life's biggest questions in beautifully different ways. Next, we will dive into the questions themselves, the timeless, universal puzzles that all philosophies, East and West, try to answer. At its core, philosophy is a quest to understand some of the most profound questions humans have ever asked. These questions shape how we see the world, ourselves, and our place in it. Let's explore some of these timeless puzzles. First, what is reality? Is the world we experience the only reality there is? Or is there something beyond our senses, something hidden beneath appearances? Philosophers call this branch metaphysics, and it wrestles with questions about existence, time, space, and even the nature of the universe itself. Is reality made up of tiny particles, or is it all consciousness? Are objects independent of our minds, or do we somehow create reality by perceiving it? These questions may seem abstract, but they matter deeply. After all, how we understand reality shapes everything, from science to spirituality. Next, do we have free will? Are we truly free to make choices, or is everything predetermined by biology, physics, or fate? If free will doesn't exist, can we be held responsible for our actions? This question challenges our ideas about morality, justice, and personal identity. Then, what is truth? Is truth absolute or relative? Can something be true for one person and false for another? How do we distinguish between facts, beliefs, and opinions? In a world filled with information and misinformation, philosophy's exploration of truth is more relevant than ever. Another big question is, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Is there a purpose to our existence, or do we create meaning ourselves? Different philosophies, religions, and cultures offer various answers, from fulfilling divine will to pursuing happiness, knowledge, or love. And what about ethics? How should we live? What makes actions right or wrong? Should we act out of duty, consequences, or virtue? Can moral rules be universal, or are they culturally relative? Ethics asks how we ought to treat others and what kind of people we should strive to be. Finally, what is knowledge? How do we know what we know? Can we trust our senses, reason, or experience? And what happens when knowledge conflicts, like in debates between science and faith? These questions don't have easy answers. Sometimes they lead to more questions, but the journey itself is where philosophy shines. Thinking about these puzzles trains our mind to be curious, skeptical, and open. It teaches us patience with uncertainty and respect for other viewpoints. Philosophy invites us to live with questions, not just answers, to embrace wonder, doubt, and reflection. In the next section, we'll focus on one of philosophy's most practical branches, ethics. How do we decide what's right and what's wrong in an often confusing world? At its core, ethics or moral philosophy asks one of the most important questions we face as human beings. How should we live? What makes actions right or wrong? What kind of people should we strive to be? Ethics is deeply practical. It's about choices, behavior, and responsibility. But it's also deeply complex, with many different approaches developed over thousands of years. One of the oldest ethical theories is virtue ethics, which goes back to Aristotle. Instead of focusing on rules, virtue ethics emphasizes character. It asks, what virtues like courage, honesty, or kindness should we develop? How do we become good people? Aristotle believed that living a good life means cultivating virtues until they become habits, leading to what he called eudaimonia, a flourishing, fulfilling life. In contrast, deontology, developed by Immanuel Kant, focuses on duties and principles. According to the deontology, some actions are right or wrongs, regardless of their consequences. For example, lying is always wrong, no matter the situation. Kant's idea is that moral rules come from reason, and we must respect others as ends in themselves, not just mean to our goals. Then there is utilitarianism, popularized by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. This theory says that the right action is the one that maximizes happiness or well-being for the greatest number of people. It's a form of consequentialism, judging morality by result. It challenges us to think about the impact of our actions on others, even strangers. Modern ethics also faces new challenges. Advances in technology, medicine, and environmental science raise fresh questions. Should we develop artificial intelligence with rights? How do we balance economic growth with climate responsibility? What ethical duties do we owe to future generations? Bioethics, environmental ethics, and AI ethics are growing fields where philosophy helps us guide difficult decisions. Why does ethical thinking matter? Because every day we face choices, big and small, that affect ourselves and others. Ethics help us navigate these decisions thoughtfully and responsibly. It teaches empathy, fairness, and integrity. It reminds us that living well is not just about success or pleasure, but about meaning and connection. The next section will explore epistemology, the study of knowledge, and how we come to understand the world around us. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that asks, what is knowledge? How do we know what we know? And just as importantly, can we be certain about anything at all? At first glance, knowledge might seem straightforward. We see, we learn, we remember. But philosophers have long challenged these assumptions. One of the earliest skeptics was René Descartes, who famously said, "I think, therefore I am." Descartes began by doubting everything he could, even the evidence for his senses, to find a foundation that was absolutely certain. His conclusion, the very act of doubting proved he existed as a thinking being. This approach sparked a long tradition of skepticism, questioning the reliability of our senses, memories, and reasoning. How can we be sure that what we perceive reflects reality? Could we be dreaming or living in a simulation? These questions may sound like science fiction, but they have serious philosophical roots. Then there is the question of justification for something to count as knowledgeable. It's not enough to just believe it. We must have good reasons for that belief. Philosophers call this justified true belief, a classic definition of knowledge. But even that has problems. In the 20th century, philosopher Edmund Gettier presented scenarios where someone had justified true belief, but we wouldn't call it real knowledge. These Gettier problems show how complicated knowledge can be. Epistemology also explores the source of knowledge. Empiricism says knowledge comes primarily from sensory experience. Think of scientists conducting experiments and observations. Rationalism argues that reason and innate ideas are the foundation of knowledge, independent of experience. Constructivism suggests that knowledge is constructed by our minds or societies, shaped by culture and context. In today's information age, epistemology is more important than ever. With so much data, opinions, and misinformation flooding our lives, learning how to evaluate sources, recognize bias, and think critically is crucial. Epistemology teaches humility. It reminds us that certainty is rare and that questioning is a strength, not a weakness. Next, we'll explore the fascinating philosophy of mind and consciousness, what it means to be aware and to think. One of the most mysterious and fascinating areas of philosophy is the philosophy of mind. This branch asks, what is mind? What is consciousness? How do our thoughts, feelings, and experiences arise? At first glance, it seems obvious. We know what it's like to be conscious because we experience it every day. But explaining how consciousness works is surprisingly difficult. One key question is the mind-body problem. Are the mind and body separate? Is the mind just the brain's physical process or something more? Dualism, famously supported by René Descartes, says that the mind and body are distinct substances. The mind is non-physical and immaterial, while the body is physical. According to this view, consciousness can't be fully explained by science alone. In contrast, physicalism argues that everything about the mind can be explained in terms of the brain and nervous system. Thoughts, feelings, and consciousness emerge from complex biological activity. A related idea is functionalism, which says mental states are defined by their functions or roles rather than their physical makeup. This opens the door to imagining minds in computers or other non-biological systems. Then there is the hard problem of consciousness, a term coined by philosopher David Chalmers. It asks, why do physical processes in the brain produce subjective experiences, the what it feels like aspect of consciousness? Other philosophers explore qualia, the individual sensations and experiences, like the redness of red or the pain of a headache. These personal experiences are difficult to explain scientifically, but central to understanding consciousness. Philosophy of mind also tackles the questions about personal identity. What makes you over your time? Is it your memories, your body, your soul, or something else? These questions aren't just academic, they influence debates about artificial intelligence, mental health, and ethics. As we learn more about the brain, the lines between philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience blur. But the mystery of consciousness remains one of the greatest puzzles. Next, we'll explore how philosophy shapes politics, justice, and society. Philosophy isn't just about abstract questions. It also deeply influences how we organize our lives together. Political philosophy asks, what is justice? What is the best way to govern? What rights and freedoms should people have? One of the earliest political philosophers was Plato, who imagined a society ruled by a philosopher king, wise rulers who know the good and can govern wisely. His student Aristotle believed in a polis, a city-state where citizens participate actively in governance, pursuing the common good. Centuries later, thinkers like Thomas Hobbes painted a darker picture. Hobbes argued that without a strong government, life would be nasty, brutish, and short. He believed people enter into a social contract, giving up some freedoms in exchange for security. In contrast, John Locke emphasized natural rights, life, liberty, and property that governments must protect. Locke's ideas heavily influenced modern democracy and the United States Declaration of Independence. Moving forward, Jean-Jacques Rousseau introduced the idea of general will, the collective interest of the people. His work inspired revolutions and debates about freedom and equality. In the 19th and 20th centuries, political philosophy expanded to consider justice more deeply. Thinkers like John Rawls developed theories about fairness, arguing for principles that would protect the most disadvantaged in society. Political philosophy also explores power, how it's distributed, maintained, and challenged. Michael Foucault examined how power operates through institutions and knowledge, shaping not just politics but culture and identity. Today, political philosophy guides debates about democracy, human rights, freedom of speech, and global justice. It asks, how do we balance individual freedom with social responsibility? What does a fair society look like in 21st century? Understanding political philosophy helps us think critically about governments, laws, and our role as citizens. In our final section, we'll explore how philosophy continues to evolve and impact our lives today. As we reach the end of our journey through philosophy, it's clear that philosophy is not just an ancient discipline. It's a living, evolving conversation that continues to shape our world. In the 21st century, philosophy intersects with cutting-edge science, technology, and society in exciting ways. For example, the rise of artificial intelligence raises profound philosophical questions. Can machines think? Can they have consciousness or moral responsibility? Philosophers work alongside computer scientists to explore the ethical and conceptual challenges of AI. Environmental philosophy tackles the urgent crisis of climate change. It asks, what ethical duties do we owe to the planet and future generations? How should we balance human needs with ecological sustainability? Philosophy also continues to address age-old human concern, meaning, identity, justice, in new contexts shaped by globalization, multiculturalism, and digital life. Beyond academia, philosophy cultivates critical thinking, open-mindedness, and the ability to navigate complexity, skills we all need in a fast-changing world. It encourages us to question assumptions, communicate clearly, and engage with others respectfully. Most importantly, philosophy reminds us to stay curious and humble, to recognize that some questions don't have easy answers, but asking them enriches our lives. So, what is philosophy? It's a quest for wisdom, a practice of wonder, a guide for living thoughtfully and deeply. No matter who you are or where you come from, philosophy invites you to join this timeless conversation. And that makes it not just relevant, but essential. Thank you for exploring philosophy with me today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, keep questioning and keep learning.